Welcome back to the Alchemist Nation podcast. My name is Walter Morello. This is a real estate podcast where we travel all across the country speaking to millionaires and multimillionaires, people who are doing really well, but they want to give back. Today, I got a special guest, Doug Wing. Doug, your father built a company called Little Giant. This is $1 billion company. Welcome to the show.
Walter, hey, it's a privilege and honored to be on your show. Yeah, I grew up working with my dad, who started Little Giant, and about 10 years old, was invited to help him and start working for him. And I spent about 45 years with one company, the same company, working with my dad, my brother, my sisters, cousins, and working as a family was very, very interesting to say the least. But I really enjoyed it. It was a great experience.
So what's interesting about it is everybody says, don't bring family into business. Don't do business with family. And a lot of times a father or a mother will build this great company and their kids won't jump into it. What do you think was different that made you and your siblings actually want to go to work and actually build this? 45 years of one company, by the way, is the secret to success. If people spend all their time working for other people's companies, or they jump into 1,000 different companies in their lifetime and they never get anywhere. What drove you to work in one company and stay in it for so long? And how did you guys work together as a family? What do you think your dad set right with the context there?
Well, my dad was such a driven person, and he had this amazing drive, and he had a great work ethic, and he learned that from growing up on a farm with my grandpa. And so, working when I was younger, I remember going to my grandfather's, and we would work in his, huge 11-acre garden, and he did that on the side. He was worked for the railroad, and then he farmed 11 acres on the side, which is unbelievable, right? And so he had to just work, work, work all day long, but learned a lot of good things, learned how to work hard. And I think, a little bit that's missing in today's society is that drive, that determination, the work ethic. But, it was interesting. My dad was very fair. But when you're working with family, not everybody can be the boss. Not everybody makes the same amount of money because you have different positions. And so, man, it's not easy to work together as a family. And so, my dad was the starter, the founder, the first generation. My brother and I were the second generation, but our sons didn't really have that drive, excuse me, and that determination to carry on the business. And so it was, it kind of ended with us. But it wasn't easy, but it really was a good experience. I had an amazing dad who, just like I mentioned, he just killed it, and he was not afraid to fail, took risks, and just gutted it out. I mean, my dad, when I was in junior high and high school, he traveled over 300 days a year, sleeping in the back of his station wagon with his ladders, eating out of an ice chest, and he could only afford to stay in a hotel about every 3 or 4 nights. So, he would wake up in the morning, he'd go find a gas station bathroom. Now, imagine doing this today, brushing your teeth, shaving, using the bathroom, kind of freshening up, and then going out and making sales calls. I just don't see people doing that today,
No, Doug, that kind of drive, and you got a new book coming out, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, that talks a lot about your dad's principles with building Little Giant. And just for other people who are listening to this podcast, and we're going to talk about real estate in a little bit, because I know that's a big part of your life, actually became a massive part of your life. But in the beginning, Little Giant was a small company. Your dad started off, he bootstrapped, he did all this hard work that most people are afraid to go and do. Most people aren't willing to go get out of their house and do these difficult tasks. But what did it become? How big did it eventually get? Who were your clients? Who are you selling these Little Giant ladders to? And I remember the Little Giant. There was the lightest ladder that you could carry everywhere. All the home inspectors that are smart use a Little Giant. So
Mhm.
how big was the company before you sold it?
Well, the company became, several multi-$100 million company. And but what people don't realize is that, the ups and downs, the highs and lows, the sacrifice, the hard. I mean, the company about went under a couple of times. It was pretty scary. We had our real tough, years where we, ran out of patents, and then we did an amazing infomercial that sparked the company again. And then with the resources we had from the infomercial, we went and innovated and got new ideas and patents and created all these lightweight ladders. But really, the drive behind the business and the successes that we had were were pretty incredible. But behind it all, my dad had this philosophy where his employees were his number one asset, and he created this culture. There's a sign on the building at Little Giant. It says, "If you concentrate on building the business and not the man, you will not succeed. But if you concentrate on building the man, you achieve both." And so we had an amazing culture there, where people were so loyal to my dad because they knew he loved and cared about them, and he built people. He really did, and then the business followed.
I love that, Doug. So you and I are in a mastermind run by Ken Walls, and you said that when you were speaking a few weeks back. You said, "Build people, and the people will build the business." I had to write that down. That was such a pivotal element for me. And I see that in a lot of successful people. They're not focused so much on the business. They know the goal, but they're focused on the people. And I think that people are blown away when they see somebody of success like yourself who treats the janitor like their best friend, just treats everybody with respect and is focused on asking, how's the family? How's everything going? And literally remembers your dad had that same personality, from what I remember what you're saying.
Yeah, we had over 400 employees. He knew the amazing thing about my dad was he knew every person by name, and he would walk through the shop, manufacturing facility. He would stop and talk. And not only did he know their name, but he knew a little something about them. So it'd take him about an hour every day to walk through. And people loved that, right? He took an interest in them. He was concerned with about their families and about them and what they were struggling with. A lot of times he would, call him into his office and say, "Hey, I know you're going through this or that. How are you doing?" So he was very involved and, really built the people, and the business just followed. I mean, Zig Ziglar said you can get anything you want if you help enough other people get what they want. And that was really the philosophy of my father and what we tried to carry on. We did carry it on as the second generation. And we were very successful as a result of very blessed.
I love that you quoted Zig Ziglar, right? No matter how successful you get, you're always looking at the great speakers and getting that motivation. As somebody I mean, you're a multimillionaire, Doug. There's no hiding it. There's no getting around it. Like you've done really well. Your father set up a great company, but you spent 45 years building and growing that company and taking risks and reinvesting. You got all of the capital from that, from the what was it, the late night advertisements,
The infomercial, yeah.
the infomercial, and then you rolled it into new development, new products, new marketing, new advertising. That's something that a lot of people miss. They take that big money and they waste it on a couple of cars or vacation homes. And I'm sure you've had your share, but you took the time to go put it back into the business so it could grow and become more. And I think a lot of that was because you had employees, you had people that you really wanted to make sure had a future. How much of that came into your thinking process as you're developing the business?
Well, one of the secrets that my dad had and he taught was, hey, and this is good for people who are running a business and starting a business. He goes, don't reward yourself too fast, too soon. And so you need to make sure and control your cash flow, watch your debt, because dealing with banks and stuff, from what we've learned is whenever things are great, the banks are willing to loan you millions of dollars. But when things start to get a little scary, then they're like, I don't know if we're going to loan you the money. So, really be careful with your cash flow, your debt, and make sure that you can run the business and not be beholden to the bankers. And so as I went through and watched my dad, I learned some of these little secrets that you just got to be really careful with indebtedness and with cash. And it's the same thing in real estate. But who Dave Ramsey is. Well, he became a multimillionaire being involved in real estate at what 25 or whatever it was. But the one problem he had was he was over leveraged, and then when the economy tanked, he lost everything. Went through bankruptcy and had to start all over again.
And then he created a great training video and program and books on how to not do that. So
Exactly. And he's making more money than he has ever before, teaching people, hey, it's okay to, here's how you grow your wealth. You do it step by step, and you got to control, you got to watch your debt, and man, he's done very well. So those are a couple of the lessons that I've learned from my dad. Was he also talked about that anytime you start a business, it's going to take you about 3 times longer than what you think it's going to take you, and it's going to cost you probably 2 or 3 times the money that you think it's going to cost you. So he was a very smart guy, and I learned a lot from him.
You know, that's such a good aspect for anybody who's looking to start as a real estate agent. We tell them it takes 3 to 6 months to get started. Real estate investors, right? It takes a little while to find your first deal, and like you and I were just talking about, your first multifamily deals is start off with one, and now you've accumulated to over 1,000 units with a partner. How does somebody stay motivated in those times where it's taking longer than they expected? It's taking more money than they expected. What is the key that you've used and that maybe your dad's also had?
Well, my parents were really interesting. My mom lived in Germany, grew up in Germany, and during the war and World War II, and so she was very conservative. My dad was a real gambler, risk taker, and so together they really kind of meshed good. And so, my dad took risks, but they were calculated risks as well. I mean, you don't want to ever over leverage yourself, and so my advice is take risks, make sure they're calculated risks, but then also, again, like we talked about, watch your cash and the debt you put yourself in. When I started in multifamily housing, it was out of necessity, because I had gone through a divorce, and my I didn't have a prenup back then. I didn't have any the money that I had now, the net worth, and so I didn't even think about that then. I was married for 25 years. And so I lost 80% of my 401k that I'd worked so hard for. And I had a real good friend that was a very successful, he's about 15 years younger than me, multi millionaire. And he started out doing the multifamily housing, excuse me, and also a property management company that's been ultra successful. So he called me one day and he goes, "What are you going to do?" He goes, you need retirement. And so we sat down, we talked about it, and as I could afford it, I bought my first apartment building, and then ended up getting up to about 7 or 8 units. Then after I sold Little Giant, then we started a new company, myself and two other partners, and which I own a third of, called Bohr Investment Group, and we have a bunch of apartments now. And but anyway, we're doing well. We're very careful. We only we really watch our debt. Most of our properties are paid for, and so, but it's been very, very good. I'm so glad I took the leap into real estate.
It's funny you say it because I've also been through a divorce and it was also a very traumatic experience. And I didn't even have a 401k to lose at the time, but you lost 80% of your 401k.
Yeah, and what people don't realize is I lost my home too. And so I was like 40 something years old, and I was living with my mother, which was a good experience because I mean, you laugh about it and go, "God, he was living with his mom," but my dad had passed away, and my mom, just a few years later passed away. And so I had about a year and a half that I lived with my mom, which, looking back at it now, I was like, man, that was really a wonderful experience because she's gone now. But it was kind of a little humiliating then. I was like, okay, I was living in my mom's, she had an apartment up above her garage, and I was living there, and I was like, man, I got to turn things around. And so with, the real estate deals that I did, I was able to get back on my feet again. And obviously when the company sold, Little Giant sold, I was doing well. So
And that's one of those silent giants, right? So the name of the company was Little Giant, the ladder company, and Lowe's and Home Depot were some of your clients. But when you sold it, you were never thinking about that money of what that company was worth up until maybe what, a year or two before selling it. Prior to that, it was just a thing that had to maintain. You had to keep doing it. You had to keep growing. You had to keep showing up. But the day a business is sold, everything changes. Now you've got to jump into a new asset class. And Doug, you made one of the things that I don't think enough people understand or do is you were in the asset class in a small way before taking all of your money and rolling it into it and moving and growing in real estate. You had already learned on a small scale. You already learned the bumps and bruises. Now, obviously, larger multifamily is a little different from 6, 7 units, but you had the basics of how a transaction goes. What do you think gave you? How much of an advantage did that give you going into it with that mindset?
oh, it was big, because, like you said, we were in a different business, but it was still business is business. I mean, and with my two partners who have been in the business for a long time, they really know the operations of how real estate works. But business is business. And I sat down and looked at the returns and that we were getting, and and it was, for me, it worked out very well because you know, I'm only going to be on this earth for, I don't know how long, but the real estate for me, I mean, the investment that I made, that's going to keep going for years and years, obviously, and going to outlast me. And so with that, with that foundation that I build, I can leave that to, different charities, or I could do foundations and feed people in the Philippines or Africa and do things like that. So this really gave me, not only a good retirement and good income until I pass, but also, it can kind of leave a legacy for my family going forward as well.
And you get those sleep at night points, right? You like, you're feeding other people, you're giving people housing. There's people whose jobs are based off of what you're doing. And obviously the seller made out because they got to let go of a property that was no longer performing the way they wanted it. So Doug, this is your long-term vision then. You see yourself just owning these properties for the long term. Are you still in acquisition mode? And I think we all always are, but are you still buying? Do you see opportunities right now, or do you feel the market's a little bit overinflated?
The market's pretty tough right now. I mean, Utah, all our properties are in Utah, and thank goodness during COVID, we did very well. We didn't have anyone who didn't pay their rent, which was very, very awesome, because California and other places were not as lucky. But the prices are kind of high. We are still in acquisition mode, and we're very calculated on what we do. These guys that I work with, my partners, they're really smart. A lot of times we'll buy buildings maybe that need a little work. And then the key for us is we have our own property management company. We can come in and get a bargain on a building. We can fix those up, and we can take the depreciation and we can write all that stuff off on our taxes. And that really helps. And then, as the years go by, we can, jump the rent a little bit. And so we always look for deals, and then we buy real good, and then we fix them up, and then we hold them pretty well. We're in the process of selling one property right now, but we always try to find another property and do a 1031 exchange so that we don't have to pay Uncle Sam a lot of money. And so we when we do that, it works out well. But we hold stuff quite a while, but we still look for some good deals to buy every now and then.
So I've got to ask, how do you do the 1031 exchange? I have attempted a couple of times and I always miss the purchase. The purchase seems to get delayed, the closing goes through fine on the sale side. Like, have you had any of those miss, or have you nailed every single one you've done?
I think our guys have nailed everyone they've done. Like I was talking to the main Robert, who's the one of the co-founders with me, and he does a lot of that. I'm kind of a silent partner. I am involved in meetings and things, but the one we're doing right now, he said, "Man, it's going to be really close." We're especially when the market's hot, Walter. It's really hard to find properties that are deals. And so right now we're like, okay, we have, I think it's what is it, 90 days you have, something like that.
Yep.
And
45
so
days to identify. Yeah.
yeah, so he said we might have to delay closing on this for 30 days, and see if the buyer will do it. And he says if they don't, we're just going to have to work like crazy to see if we can make this happen. So yeah, you've got that tight window, and in a market that's hot, that is a real challenge. So I think these guys can do it. They're smart guys, and yeah, we want to definitely do the exchange if we can.
I like that. I like that. The advice to it too is just do the extension. A couple of times I was too desperate to close that I was like, and I'll be honest, the burden wasn't, it was almost negligible. We were doing smaller dollar amounts. And so we'd look at it and say, you know what, let's just take the cash, we'll roll it, whatever. But as you start getting to bigger dollar amounts, you've held the properties longer or they've appreciated massive amounts, it really starts to make a lot of sense to do the 1031 and that negotiating tip of just extend the closing on the sales side to line up with the buy side, and that 1031 goes through. So Doug, you and I love that you're passive. A lot of my friends are like yourself. They just say, you know what, I just want to passively invest and let you guys run the machine. And my business partner loves to do the work. He's like, he loves to do the work, and he's got a great team. And I feel the same way. I like to identify the deal, but at the end of the day, I don't want to be too involved in, once we close, I want him to handle it.
Mhm.
So instead of real estate, Doug, I want to talk about the book, right? You've got a book coming out that I think most people, anybody listening right now, by the way, if you are listening and you haven't given me a review on iTunes, go to alchemistnation.com, iTunes, give us a positive review. If Doug's giving you great content, we have other great speakers, but Doug's got a book coming out that I think every listener should go and grab when it does come out, because it's the principles of how do you build a multi-million dollar company, a multi-million dollar company, sell it. What are the principles to building that company? What kind of mindset do you have to have? What kind of person do you have to be? And I think you got to be a leader of leaders. Doug, if you could give us a little bit of information about the book, what's in it? What's the title of it? How can we find it?
Sure. Excuse me. The book is called Giant Success, and it'll have 15 core principles and values of Hal Wing, the founder of the Little Giant Ladder Company. And so in this book, it's going to be a great book for entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople, just anybody who's interested in business and how to deal with people and work with people and create success. Now, I do have a website. It's dougwing.com. And on that website, you can go on there. There's a section that you can click on, and we don't sell your list or anything like that, your information, but you can click on that and be notified when the book is available. We'll be going to editing here about November, December on the book, and then it'll be available in early spring of next year, 2022. So I'm really excited about this book. It's going to really share the secrets that Hal Wing had that made him successful, and I know it's going to help other entrepreneurs as they, start new businesses or continue to grow and build their companies, and will really help them to succeed.
I love that you're doing the book, and I love that you're taking your time with it. I think a lot of people don't understand how long a book takes. And for anybody who's ever read a book that changed their lives, they know the value of the book, right? We know I've read over 350 books. Your book is going to be one that I put right at the top as soon as it comes out, because your story is consistent. Every time I talk to you, every time I see you on one of the masterminds, you're sharing more and more information. There's so many little tidbits that you have that are just massive principles. And for somebody who's listening and wants to become successful, listen to successful people. Like the way Doug speaks is he doesn't even know he's doing it. He's just speaking. To him, it sounds like common sense because he's worked on himself for so many years. He's, listened to his father who also worked on himself so many years. Live experience. This seems like common sense to you, Doug. But for the average person, it's strange, like just wow, just build people, right? Focus on keeping your debt at bay, buy assets that make sense for the long term, invest in others. What is the driver behind you writing the book? Because I know how much work they are. A book is a ton of work. There's a lot of time put into it. There's a lot of energy put into it. There's a lot of emotions put into it. You're concerned with what people will think when they read it. What drives you to do this? What keeps you motivated to keep writing it? And what do you think the big goal for you coming out of it is?
Oh, that's a great question. I think firstly, um, just there's going to be some members of the Wing family, now that we don't have Little Giant anymore as a family business. There's going to be down the road here in a couple generations some Wing, cousins and things like that that don't even know anything about Hal Wing. So I kind of thought, this is something that will be really good for his legacy and for his family. And something that really needs to be written. As I talk to my siblings, they're like, "Hey, we're really not interested, but we think you could do a good job." So I ended up kind of like wanting to do this. I thought about this for quite some time. And then the other thing that I think about is, he had so many nuggets. He had so much wisdom. I mean, this is a guy that had a high school education, right? That built a multi-million dollar company, and he did it, his way, and he had some just awesome ideas. And so I thought this is going to be something that down the road can benefit, thousands of people and help them to, avoid some of the pitfalls that, that are out there in business and that maybe they haven't heard before. So those are the two reasons really for this book.
I love it. And your dad has some really great experiences. There's a story you told us the other night on the mastermind where you were saying that there was, I guess the manufacturer wasn't doing the ladders right. And your dad came in and saw that the ladders weren't being built with the right way. They were, cutting corners. And can you just tell that story, how your dad reacted?
Yeah, so this was when the infomercial took off, and we went from building 400 ladders a day to 7,000. So going from one shift, 4 10-hour days, 4 10 hour days, to building products 6 days a week, 24 hours a day, 3 shifts. And my dad's sitting up at his house. Keep in mind the plant was probably 5 miles from his house, the manufacturing plant. He's sitting up at his house and he had this kind of weird vibe where he would say, something's not right. I'm going to run down to the shop. And he runs down there. He's in his house slippers and he goes in there and they're building, like it was either the swing or the one of the shifts, night shifts, and they're building just crappy ladders. I mean, and my dad just is not happy and he stops production, gets everybody together, and he says, hey, every ladder that goes out has my name on it. Is a potential, somebody could get hurt if they're not built properly. We had amazing quality, amazing brand. And he said, what we're going to do tonight is you guys have built 800 ladders, and we're going to cut all these ladders up and we're going to throw them in the garbage. And we're going to start over and we're going to build quality products. And so that's the kind of the kind of leader, the kind of the mentor, the business owner, the dad that I had. He was just committed to quality and excellence, and in teaching that to others. And so that night they chopped up ladders and threw them in a big dumpster that they recycled, and they started over again.
Doug, I could interview you all day. I feel like the things that I love these stories, and I've heard that story before, and I wanted to hear it again on Ken Wall's Mastermind, like breaking through walls, right? So, Doug, I got to ask you. We're gonna end this in a little bit, but there's a powerful question I ask every guest when I feel they've earned it, when I feel like they've got the answer. If you could go back to 20-year-old Doug and give yourself 3 pieces of advice that would change your life, get you to where you are faster, happier, more successful, what would you tell a 20-year-old entrepreneur just starting out right now? What 3 pieces of advice do you think you would give them that would really move them forward?
The first one was, these are lessons that I learned from my dad. And the first one was, my dad taught us at Little Giant, you can tell the customer anything you want to, as long as it's the truth. So stop and think about that for a minute. So I would tell people, if you're starting a business, you're working with vendors, customers, anyone that you have relationships with, always take the high road and tell the truth, because it will always come back in spades to you, and you will have so many people who will see your integrity and your commitment to just being truthful. So that would be my first one. The second one that I would recommend would be he had another quote that said, if it's not good for everybody around the table, uh, if it's not a good deal for everyone around the table, it's not a good deal. So my dad was very fair as well. There were many times when we would be in a meeting, whether it was the vendor or a big distributor or somebody like that, where my dad would say, hey, I don't think this is fair because I'm getting the lion's share, and that's not fair. So let's renegotiate and, make it fair for everybody around the table. So again, that goes back to the honesty thing. So I would say, tell the truth, make sure it's a good deal for everybody you're doing business with. And then the other thing is my dad had this little saying where he said, the harder I work, the luckier I get. Now, so Hal Wing had this drive and determination and self-belief and hard work, that he just bulldozed his way to success and gutted it out. And the other thing is with that is, do not expect success overnight. You have to pay the price. If you'll put in the hard work and the determination and the effort, in the end, you'll be rewarded for that. And so I think those 3 things will really carry people a long ways.
Doug Wing, amazing. I love that. You are an alchemist. And if I'm to define an alchemist is somebody who transforms themselves into something more valuable and then goes forward and transforms other people into their higher selves, allows them to get to that next level. I think I've mentioned I'm on a mission to build 100 millionaires who are inspired to build 100 millionaires. And I believe that you're doing the same thing by sharing your dad's advice and wisdom, the things that you learned. I just want to say thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I genuinely appreciate the relationship, brother. Thank you.
Walter, it's been a privilege. You've got so much energy, and when I first met you, I was just blown away by. I come across maybe not as uh, uh, I don't know, you're so bubbly and you're so enthusiastic, but I do appreciate your show and how your goal to build all these millionaires and your enthusiasm. It's really incredible. I do appreciate this. This has been a real honor to be on your show. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. For everybody who's listening, cheers to your success. When you have a choice, always work with the best. That's cool, man.